Let's make some concrete soap dishes together. So what I'm doing here is measuring out my concrete mix. I will measure out 40 ounces at a time, and the water to concrete mix ratio is a 4-to-1. So since I'm using 40 ounces of concrete mix, I'm going to add 10 ounces of water once I get that measured out. Now here I am using Allcrete. I had some Allcrete left over and really just wanted to use it and finish it up. I really prefer using Cementol. And the reason I prefer Cementol is, in my opinion, it is a lighter mixture. So if I want something that's just more of a light gray, if I'm using the coloring of the base concrete, or I want my white swirls to pop a little bit more, I just like the way that it looks in Cementol a little bit better than the Allcrete. So here's where I am adding my 10 ounces of water. So again, that's 40 ounces of Allcrete and 10 ounces of water. And I would do the same ratio if I was using Cementol. Now, what I'm doing now is stirring in that water. I use a silicone bowl. It's not a huge bowl, but I really like the silicone. I can feel the batter with my hand as well as the paint stick that I'm stirring it with. And that's just what I choose to use, is a paint stick. It's easy to scrape everything, and I don't use something that is going to cause bubbles in the batter. I'm trying to prevent or have as few bubbles as possible. That's very important whenever you are stirring the concrete. I am sure you also noticed the puff of smoke that's coming from the concrete as I first started to stir this. Concrete is also very, very drying on the skin. So I will wear gloves and I will have a face mask. So make sure your PPE is in place. I do stir and make my concrete soap dishes out in the garage as well. And I also pull my cars out of the garage before I get started. Just because that dust, the dust from Allcrete or Cementol is very fine and it can get in the air. And speaking from experience, I do not want my car covered in concrete dust. So I just pull the cars out, make it in the garage, and then sweep the garage and pull the cars back in. Now, as I am stirring this batter, I'm really looking for a pancake consistency. I'm also looking to make sure that all the lumps are out of the pancake mold. And then this is where I'm adding my acrylic paint. I get asked all the time, what brand of acrylic paint do I use? It's not a specific brand. In fact, I think this one I got from the dollar store. I will typically buy whatever is on sale. And so this first batch just has a white swirl that I'm going to be adding to the molds. So as I am pouring this into the molds, I do try to make sure that the paint is going into the mold first. Now, there will be a lot of tapping or vibrating of the molds, which I will show here in a moment, but I'm not so worried about making sure that it's totally filled until I get it onto my vibrating plate. Now here, as I'm going down, you'll see I do have some lumps still. I didn't get them all out, and I'm going to show you what to do with that. Now on this particular mold, there is a bump that is on the top, a lump that was in the batter. I just take my paint stick and tap that down. It will absorb right into the concrete. And this is my vibrating machine. I don't have the sound on because it is very, very loud. And as it's vibrating, it's filling the mold, and I am slowly adding until the concrete is at the very top of the mold. In a perfect world, I would not have any spillover and it would just be perfect right there on the top. If I need to, I will tap the sides of the mold while it's on the vibrator. Right now, it's just on the vibrator. I will turn it up to give it more of a vibration. This was a huge time saving for me. This will help get the air bubbles out from the bottom of the mold. They will help prevent any lines. You'll see that I still will tap it. If I'm seeing that concrete is not in the mold the way that I want, I can adjust the how hard the vibration is going, or to have it be more of a light tap. Now, another thing that I've done that is a huge cost saving, and you can see that I turned that vibration up just a little bit more than I wanted. You could see how much that mold was tapping around. And then here is a perfect example. I was so in tune with trying to get a recording that I just spilled it right out. I don't worry about it. I don't try to clean it up. I just let it set. It's super easy to come off, even from my vibrating plate, and so I don't worry about that. However, a must-have for me is these little cardboard squares that are on the bottom of each mold. When I first started moving a mold from the vibration plate to the table, or if you have to move it or juggle things around, it is almost impossible to not spill concrete to be able to do that. However, these little cardboard, I just cut them out of a cardboard. That's all it is cardboard from a box, from a delivery or an Amazon box, any one of those, and just cut them to fit each individual mold. And so all I'm doing here is the molds that I just poured with the 40 ounces. I am tapping, vibrating, filling, making sure that it is filled all the way on the particular mold that I'm working on, and then setting it down ready to have it start hardening before I demold it. Now, the other thing that I'm doing, if I do add concrete to the back of the mold like I'm doing here, I'm very careful to make sure that that is not going to break through the layer that I originally poured that has the paint on what will be the top of the mold. So what you're seeing here is the bottom of the mold. And I want to make sure that the paint is what will be displayed. It is quite possible, depending on how you poured, that acrylic paint that you're adding would just be mixed into the mold. And so now this is all of the molds that I just finished, where I've just added that white acrylic paint to the top of the batter, and I've swirled it. And so a lot of this, I'm hoping this is how it will look like when I unmold it. Now, as I unmold the dishes, I am just pulling it apart from all around the sides of it. Now, as I unmold, and I've actually slowed this video down a little bit, I'm slowly prying the mold from all around the sides and not pulling it out. I'm being very careful. And this has been curing for 2 hours. So 2 hours is all that it needs for the concrete soap dishes, and then they're ready to unmold. So here's another one that I'm unmolding where I'm just pulling apart all the sides. This is a little bit different because it has drain holes. And so I just make sure that those drain holes popped out and everything is coming out from the dish. And this is what that one looks like. Now, this particular mold is a much thicker mold. So I'm very careful, slowly pulling it apart, trying to release the mold. I'm pushing from the bottom. It is all released. It's not that it's difficult to come out, but I'm trying to make sure that I don't break it. This particular mold is very thin on the bottom, so I'm also looking at both sides and making sure that it's not broken and it's a usable form. Now, here is one where I did have concrete that spilled off on the side, and you can see how easy it does come off. Now, the problem with this that I hate doing is it will require a lot of sanding. And so to make sure that the soap dish has a much more level bottom and it was higher on one side than the other, that will require a lot of sanding when I get to that particular dish. And so that's more irritating. You can see that it's thicker, and so it will require more sanding on that to make it seamless. So here is where I am putting on a different set of gloves that I can feel a little bit better, and now I'm going to be sanding the bottoms of each dish. Now what I'm doing here is I've got a 60 count sandpaper. It's easier on this device to hold the sandpaper, and I'm getting all of the rough edges down at the bottom. I've got a very fine sandpaper that I will use to kind of finish it and make it more of a smooth surface. I will not sand the top at all, but I'm poking through to make sure all of the concrete gets through and it's actually a hole. And I'm constantly feeling the bottom to make sure that there's no sharp edges, that I've got a smooth surface. Sometimes I will go around the edge and make sure that that's a smooth surface as well. But that's what I'm basically looking at is trying to make it a smooth surface. Now here you can see this is a much higher, so I had a lot more concrete that came out of the mold. And again, this is what causes a lot of sanding. And so I prefer to have it as close to the top as I can without going over. And what I mean by that is not pouring over the mold. So I'm trying to get it to the top of the mold as closely as possible. So there's a lot more sanding involved with this particular dish. You'll notice that I am constantly feeling it. I'm feeling for any rough edges, and those edges that were a lot thicker, I'm sanding and using really muscle. So trying to get this as flat and even as possible. Sometimes I may even take a look at it on the table itself and just see how it sits and how it would drain. And I'll continue to sand until I'm happy with it. Sanding is also the easiest as soon as I unmold the soap. The concrete is not 100% cured. It's still very soft on the back. So I'm not using so much muscle to get it flat. And then there are some dishes like this one, there's hardly anything that needs to be sanded at all. I'm just making sure that there's no sharp edges on the bottom, that it's all clean, and then this one is done. So it really just depends on the pour itself and how that works to complete the soap dish. So each soap dish will provide different challenges, different things that you want to take a look at. And a lot of times I will just be inspecting the dish as I am sanding it and getting ready. There may be little tiny holes that an air bubble may have been in. That is normal. I will take a look at those and see, is this something that I can still sell? Obviously, I'm going to seal the dishes as well, and it just may not become obvious. Sometimes it gives the dish more character. So I really will just really inspect every dish, take a look at it, see how it looks, see how it feels, make sure that there's no sharp edges, and that I am sanding any sharp edges that they may have, or rounding corners. Sometimes I'll do this with this dish as well, and sometimes they fall into the trash. So this fell into the trash. It didn't break. I seem to drop one in the trash every time I make soap dish, and most of the time they do break. So here I'm just making sure this isn't broken or good, and I'm ready to go to the next dish. Now, this mold that I'm selecting, you'll notice that there is concrete that spilled over on the side of the mold when I poured it. And before I'm even unmolding it, I'm just trying to get rid of that excess. And doing all of this over a trash can is the easiest thing for me to do. I just will get, to the best of my ability, you'll notice I am in a drop cloth, so it's easier to clean up at the end. But anything I can do over a trash can is worth it. On the mold, I'm trying to make sure that there's no concrete left in the mold or even on the cardboard platform that it's on. And then with my hand, before I even start sanding, I'm just trying to get rid of all of the excess concrete that is already on the bottom of the mold. I'm trying to get that off even before I take my sander to it, to give those kind of a smoother edge before I even start sanding. So I'm just looking at the edges. Even though it poured over, the bottom is relatively flat and easy. And so again, I look at each dish individually, and I find sanding or doing any of this right over the trash can helps tremendously with the cleanup effort. Now this particular mold is an oblong shaped. It's also very different in pulling the soap dish out. I could muscle the dish out and get it out a lot quicker, but I'm purposely taking my time, making sure that it is released on all sides, and then being careful as I pull it out with the slats that are in this particular mold. And then again, just cleaning out any excess concrete over the trash can helps tremendously with cleanup, but I'm just getting this prepped for the next batch. And then again, I'm just inspecting the dish, making sure that it looks good, that I'm happy with the way that it looks. You can see a lot of air bubbles on the bottom, which I think brings such beautiful character to the dish. I also have to be careful in the way that I'm sanding this because I don't want to sand the side of the dish. I really just want to sand the very bottom, making sure that there are no sharp edges and that the bottom is flat. And then this next dish, I purposely left in here. This is the dish that I was too excited about recording and spilled all over the top. So here I'm just removing the concrete from the cardboard platform that it sits on, and then I'm taking a lot more time removing the concrete from the mold even before I attempt to unmold this dish. And this is why I don't really concern myself if I do over pour. I don't try to clean it up in the middle of the pour. I just let it harden, and then it really does flake right off. It's quite easy to come off, and this is why I don't worry about it. Once I have a lot of the molding extra concrete off of the mold, then I will pull it out. Now this is also a great example of when the concrete batter pours through and impacts the other side of it. So from the direction of this concrete, you can see that it's the gray concrete where paint is not on there. And that's where too much slipped out of my bowl and right into the mold and even over poured. And so as I turn this over, you'll also see that gray concrete where to the right of my screen, half of it is gray, that also transposes to the front or the top of the mold. And that's what happens when the concrete breaks through. Now, as I looked at this, I would have preferred there to be the white paint and more of a swirl, but I don't think that this looks bad in this particular mold. It just gives it a little more character. It's a little different. I love doing swirls. I think they are a lot more forgiving than if I'm trying to do a solid color concrete dish. But you definitely can see that there's more gray on the top than necessarily paint. And so that's what I'm careful of. And then I left this mold in this picture as well, because it's a flimsier, cheaper mold than my other molds. It's not as thick, and it's a lot more difficult to get my finger in there and start unmolding it. So cheap dishes you still can use. They do make beautiful dishes. In fact, this particular one is one of my favorite dishes that the dish makes. I love how raised those lines are, so that the soap stays off, but there's not a hole for liquid to seep through. I have a lot of customers that they specifically do not like the holes. They want the liquid to all be contained, but this one has high enough ridges that the soap sits in that the soap will stay dry, and then you just kind of empty out the liquid. So again, here as I'm sanding, I need to be careful because the bottom of it is set in on the soap dish a little bit. And so I don't want to sand any of the decorative piece or the integrity of what the dish as it sits on the counter will look like. I'm just trying to sand the very bottom. But this is one of my favorite, and it also is one of my cheaper molds. So you still can use less expensive molds. You don't have to get $15 to $20 molds every time, and they work fine as long as you keep your molds cleaned and stored properly, which we will also talk about in this video. As much as I do not love sanding the dishes, it is a way to make sure that it looks the best that I can get it and one that I am proud of. I don't like all of the dust. I am wearing a face mask while I am doing this because it does get everywhere. It does seem to help to sand right on top of a trash can. And I also wear the oldest clothes or my soaping clothes to make sure that I'm not, ruining. Basically, I'm working out in the garage. So whatever you're comfortable wearing outside or as you're doing a little chores, that's what I would suggest. And here I have sped this video up. I am unmolding because who doesn't love to watch unmolding? That's the best part of making these concrete soap dishes and see what they look like. I also wanted to talk through different tips that I have done as I've made these concrete soap dishes. So titanium dioxide. I do not put that in my soap, but I do put that in my concrete batter. So I did add a little bit of titanium dioxide to the water prior to mixing the concrete because I wanted it a little bit lighter. I also will, as I'm doing batches of concrete, I usually do 4 to 5 batches of concrete. I let them set for 2 hours before I mold, an hour and a half to 2 hours before I unmold them. And then I will go in and do another round right away. I will plan my concrete soap dishes and do the lighter shades first. So if I'm using some white paint, I will do those first. If I want to use titanium dioxide in the batter to get it a little brighter, I will do that first. Then if I'm adding a brown paint or a black paint or a sparkle paint, I will go from lighter to darker. And the reason for that is while I'm doing an all-day concrete mix day, because again, if it's 2 hours and I'm doing 5 batches, 2 hours in between before I can unmold it, it's a 10-hour day of just doing concrete. And obviously I can do other things while they're curing, but that's how long all the equipment is out. And rather than do 1 or 2 very small batches, I will do these larger batches throughout the day. And so going from lighter to darker, I have found that there are occasions where paint doesn't come all the way off. Some stays on the mold. And so if I am using a black paint as an example, that could stay on the mold because I don't wash the molds in between the batches when I'm working a full day like today. I will wash the molds once at the very end. And as long as I am going from lightest to darkest in the mold or the batches that I have, then I find that that is perfect. And that's what I will choose to do. And here is an example of that in my cure rack where I am going from lighter to a darker paint to batter where I've added concrete dye and then a little bit darker and black paint. And so it's just easier if I go lighter to darker. I don't have any issues. Now I wanted to include a little snippet here on getting distracted or having too thick of batter. So I was distracted after I had mixed. I didn't get the concrete poured into the molds as quick as I should have, which made it a very thick batter. And so I quickly poured what I could into the molds of the thick batter, and now I'm putting it on my vibrating plate. And while the vibrating plate is on a low setting, I am tapping. I'm using my paint stick to help kind of guide some of the paint in. And then I'm tapping a lot more. And then here I'm bracing with my hands on the mold so it doesn't slip off of the plate, but turning the vibrating plate on very high. And just kind of guiding it. And what I think of here actually is an earthquake. When there's an earthquake, the sand or the earth that your house is sitting on can really turn mushy. That's the best way for me to explain it right now. And so that's what I'm causing is really an earthquake to get that concrete settled. And so here is a much higher, and I'm sorry for the filming. I'm more concerned about getting it into the mold. So again, the vibrating plate is on at the same time that I use the paint stick. I will really turn the vibration up on high. If you don't have a vibrating machine, you're just going to have to really tap it, move it around, vibrate the base of it to the best of your ability, and it will settle down. Now, it is times like this that I'm going to get more air bubbles, and I'm actually okay with that. I do like the character that air bubbles will have in a concrete dish, and since these are not something that is containing anything like a candle vessel, as an example, where I don't want candle wax to be able to seep through the concrete. This is a little bit different because it is a dish that is going to be on my sink or bathroom sink or even shower. So I'm not so concerned about the air bubbles. And now because of the thickness, I am adding a little bit more water. And then I will grab a kind of a spare dish that I'm not as fond of. It's not a great seller, but I will use up the rest of this concrete for that. And here, even though I added a little bit of water and trying to thin out, again, to that pancake consistency, I am still stirring it, trying to pick up pieces, concrete from the side of it, and really make sure that there are no bubbles. And then here I'm almost out of the silver paint, so I'm just kind of squeezing the last of that paint, and then I'm adding another color, a bronze metallic color to it, and then swirling, or I guess I used a silver metallic paint. Oh, there goes the bronze. So here I'm doing three different colors, and then just taking my chopstick and swirling it around so that the paint does not glop up when I pour. This is that mold that isn't as popular. And then I'm just pouring the rest of this batter into the mold, getting it on the vibrating bottom and letting that settle. And you can kind of see, even though it is a thicker concrete, it does settle and then become flat. Having as level of a surface that you can will help it. It doesn't have to be as level as resin, as an example, but you do want it to be as level as possible. And then this is all of our dishes from today that we've made. And I will put them on my cure rack. This is where they will cure for about a week. They really would only have to cure for a couple of days, but I let them go for a full week, make sure that the concrete is fully cured. Here are some other examples of items that are in the mold, I'm waiting for them to cure, where I've added concrete dye to the concrete. And so that's why it's a little bit darker. I added a brown dye, which this is the result when they become unmolded. So again, I go lighter to darker as I am pouring, and this is the final batch that I will cure and then add to the rack. And here are some completed dishes. These have already been sealed and they are ready to go to my website or my next in-person event. I will seal with a polyacrylic clear gloss sealer. I like the way that a clear gloss works over a matte finish. And so on this particular dish, I'll just kind of move it around in the light. You can see that the clear gloss, I personally like the way that that looks. It's almost like a wet type of a look. I will put one coat on the bottom and two coats on the top. And I use a larger paintbrush to apply it. And now for the most glamorous part of concrete is the cleanup. So this is my silicone bowl that I pour the concrete and mix it in. I love silicone because even though there is a lot of concrete on the sides and on the bottom, it does come out relatively easy. It is easy to flake off once it's totally dry. And in fact, this is usually, or this bowl is a couple of days old since I made the concrete. So it's a little harder of a concrete. I do prefer cleaning it out, again, the same 2 hour that I wait for the concrete dishes, but everything does pop out relatively easy. I'm not going to go through the entire time of cleaning it out, rubbing it together to really loosen up all of that concrete, and again over the trash can, but everything does come out very easily. I do not clean this bowl, meaning with soap or water, or get everything. I just get all of the big chunks out. They come out relatively easy. You can see at the bottom it's already popped out. That's how easy it is to pull everything out, and then I will just store it away. I also wanted to show how easy it is to clean the silicone molds. So all I've got here is some warm water with dish soap. And these molds, normally I will let them soak for 30 minutes to an hour. That helps the cleanup process even more. These did not soak at all. And I didn't fill my sink up. I just put some dish soap in there, filled it up. I have a bottle brush that is specifically used for my molds. And all I'm doing is washing the outside and then washing the inside. I do fold the molds back, make sure that I get all of the paint out, all of the concrete dye. I have a little attachment that's a smaller little scrub brush. I'll just make sure to get in every nook and cranny of the soap mold. They really do clean up very easily, which is why I like the silicone molds so much. The dye that is used even on the outside, that comes out relatively easy, and then I just rinse them and let them sit out and dry. So I didn't speed this video up. I wanted you to see real time how really easy it is to get these cleaned, but it is important to make sure that you are cleaning them. The molds are expensive, and I don't want to be 10 uses, 20 uses, 30 uses, and then I have to purchase another mold. I want to keep these as clean as possible and also store them correctly. So once I finish cleaning them and rinse them, I'll let them dry completely. And then once they dry completely, I will put them inside Ziploc bags. So I will grab a gallon, the Ziploc gallon freezer bags, and I can fit 2 or 3 molds. I will make sure that they're flat, meaning they are not on top of each other, and put them in this Ziploc bag, and then I store them in my garage. So I live in a desert. It gets very hot in my garage, and I have had zero issues as long as I store them in that way. A lot of the little pieces or the paint just comes off very easily with my finger or with my scrub brush. So I am very, very happy with the way that these clean up, and I'm able to save them. And this last little video is a soap dish that has been in my kitchen for at least a year. I know a year for sure. It very well could be 2. I do add these little plastic feet on the bottom of all of my soap dishes. These help so that it doesn't slide around. It also doesn't scratch whatever surface it's on. You'll notice that there is a bonk on that. I actually dropped this one when I was making it, which then it became mine. So I still sealed it, and this is what it looks like with soap on it. And again, it's a minimum of a year. It very well could be longer that has been on my soap counter. Thank you for hanging out with me, for taking this soap dish creation journey with me, and enjoy. And you too can have a luxurious experience with soap.